Yeah, on to the next discussion. There is a fresh anxiety among investors in the Nigerian stock market as some quoted companies are set to delist from the Nigerian Stock Exchange.
Now, there are fears that more companies may follow suit and exit the exchange. The NSC disclosed that two firms, paints and coatings manufacturers Nigeria PLC, which got listed 7 years ago, and Avon Crown Caps and Containers Nigeria PLC have already applied to exit the exchange.
But before we go further, let's quickly break down what some of these jargons mean. To a layman, of course, a quoted company is a public limited joint stock company whose shares are traded or sold publicly on an official stock exchange like the Nigerian Stock Exchange market.
Now, as at March of 2017, the NSC had 76 listed companies with a total market capitalization of 8.5 trillion naira, and that's the third largest stock exchange in Africa. Now, at the end of every financial year, these companies declare their profits and dividends to the public, and by doing this, they're able to attract more individuals to buy their stocks and, in the process, raise capital to run their businesses.
Well, delisting is the process by which a listed security is removed from the exchange on which it trades. A company can voluntarily ask to be delisted, or they could be delisted by the exchange for failure to comply with the listing requirements. Now, when companies voluntarily request to be delisted as against the stock exchange delisting them for failure to meet obligations, like we said earlier, it's an indication that all is not well with the economy.
Yes, indeed. And now this is coming at a time when the federal government is saying that Nigeria is officially out of recession. So how will this affect the nation's economy? We have our guest who is joining us via Skype. He's an investment banker, Nemeka Obereri. Good morning and thanks for joining us on TVC Breakfast this morning. It's been a while.
Good morning, Ngozi. My pleasure.
Yes, indeed. Now, since 2002, 85 Nigerian companies have been delisted from the NSC. That's 14 years. 2002 till date. What does this really mean for the Nigerian economy? And then you have this thrown in the mix. Companies are now delisting from the NSC voluntarily at the time when the Nigerian government is saying to us we're officially out of recession.
Ngozi, the whole essence of the capital market, having the capital market is actually a market for long-term investment. It's a market where the surplus economic units mixed with deficit economic units, where companies go to raise long-term capital for investments. The depth of the capital market also has great influence on the strength of an economy. If you look at a country like South Africa, with a GDP of about $298 billion, the market capital of South Africa Stock Exchange, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, is about $1 trillion. Compared to Nigeria, a $415 billion sized economy with a stock market that is not even up to $100 billion by way of market capitalization. Now, there are challenges that we have, very peculiar challenges in this market. Remember that the whole essence of the company going to the stock exchange to list, first of all, of course, is to give it to provide it with wider access to capital through the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Also to provide liquidity for the company in terms of the ability of the shareholders to be able to exchange value, sell and buy shares. Now, one of the requirements for a company that is supposed to be listed on the floor is the issue of transparency. Being listed in the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, of course, going through the whole approval process from SEC and all the rest of them, entails more transparency, entails more accountability on the part of the company. You will discover that in a situation where there's so much apathy, if you look at the number of Nigerians that are participating in the stock exchange market, you will have less than 3% of the population. Check out the number of people that have accounts with the CSCS, people that have accounts with stockbroker. You discover that we're talking about less than 5% of the Nigerian population. There is so much apathy there. People are wary investing in quoted stocks in Nigerian stock exchange because of the past experiences 2008, 2009 was a very ugly period for Nigerians. Most people lost their life savings. Most people lost their investments. So there is so much apathy. Most Nigerians are no longer willing to play in the stock exchange because of the issue of transparency. I will give you an example. There's one particular quoted company, Standard Alliance Insurance PLC. Transparency. I will give you an example. There's one particular quoted company, Standard Alliance Insurance PLC. Over the last since 2009, 2008, when they went to the stock market, of course, I happened to get investors that invested heavily in that stock. As I talk to you, 9 years after investment, these investors have not seen dividend. These investors have not even received any invitation for any of their AGMs. There is lack of transparency in some of the companies going to the stock exchange, and the regulators are not doing anything to assuage the fears of investors.
All right, so what will all this have on the image of the Nigeria Stock Exchange, really? Because many, especially shareholders, are saying that they do not even protect listed firms as they should do.
See, the truth of the matter is that I am of the opinion that even the regulators are not even firm. For example, there are listing requirements. One of the requirements for you to be quoted on the floor is that you must provide your quarterly reports. Tell me, how many of these 176 companies provide their quarterly reports as at when due on the floor of the exchange that will enable investors to be able to do the analysis to know what their performances are? How can an investor invest 40 million naira in a stock over the last in 9 years? The value of that stock has gone down to about 4 million naira. He had lost almost 90% of his investment. No dividend, no report. The investor does not even know what happens in the company that he invested in. I think one of the things that have raised apathy in the market is the issue of the regulators, both SEC and the not being so firm enough. We've had instances of companies going to the market, they say, okay, they're going to raise money, and after raising money, they will list. Since they raised that money, they've not listed. Example is one insurance company, IGI PLC. So there are so much apathy. Why most of these companies are delisting on their own is because most people most investors in Nigeria are so wary of investing in some of these companies, are so wary of even attending to their new issues, even new IPOs. So one of the ways we must solve this is that the regulators must come up with ways of regulating the market in an appropriate fashion. Sanction greed must be listed. A situation where a company is listed for over 7 years, we do not see quarterly reports. Investors are not invited for shareholders meeting. Questions are not being asked. Shareholders' funds are being daily eroded, weekly eroded. Yet the major promoters of that company are living large, wasting all the funds.
So what you're saying, Naimeka, if I may come in, is there is a huge regulatory failure.
Deficiency.
So how do you even bring back confidence for the not just the local investor, foreign investors too, since they're a target of this government? How can confidence be returned? You said less than 3% of Nigerians are actually in the capital market. And I wonder what the potential really is, the real potential for the Nigerian capital market.
Because, you see, the truth of the matter, like I said, investors' confidence must be restored.
How do you restore investors' confidence?
Regulators must devise ways of regulating transparently in an accountable manner. There are a lot of infractions in the market that are not being penalized. I give you an instance. It is required that a quoted company must at least provide quarterly reports of its performances. Till today, there are many companies that are quoted in the floor of the Nigerian exchange that do not have quarterly reports. They do not keep on to this. And the regulators are not doing anything about it. There are a lot of infractions in the system. The SEC and Nigerian Stock Exchange must devise ways of ensuring that directors, promoters of quoted companies live up to the corporate governance oath and ethics that they swore to before those companies were listed. Unless that kind of confidence is injected into the market, most Nigerians will continue to shy away from Nigerian Stock Exchange. As an investor, as an investment banker, I know many people that we convinced over the last 10 years to invest in Nigeria who got their fingers burnt and who will never hear anything about Nigerian Stock Exchange because of the lapse in regulations, because of the flagrant ways in which people abuse the process and are not punished because of it.
All right, but let's look at companies that are delisting voluntarily now. When does it become the better alternative, really, for a company to say, I want to leave the Nigerian Stock Exchange, just like the Nigeria Bottling Company did a while back?
Now, let me explain to you. Remember what I said, the whole essence of companies going to the Nigerian Stock Exchange to get it, so is to give them deeper access to fund. Now, when the whole essence or the whole reason for getting listed have been defeated because of investors' apathy, there's no need for the company to still remain listed on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. If you look at some of the companies that are requesting to voluntarily delist themselves, like Cutis PLC, like Avon Crown PLC, these are companies that on their own they are doing very, very well. These are companies on their own have good corporate governance cultures. At least I know about these two companies. So the whole essence of going to the market for them is to give them greater access, greater opportunities for long-term capital from diverse investors.
But you would hear some listed firms.
There's no need for them getting listed in the floor. It's better for them to delist.
All right, Obiari, some listed firms would even tell you that the minimum standards they are expected to keep as listed companies at the market are quite high for them to do, and they don't even enjoy the scrutiny of the stock market.
The truth of the matter is, for anyone that requires to be listed on the floor of the exchange, there are minimum transparency requirements.
All right, you know what, Nemeka, let me put you on hold. Would like to hear those minimum requirements as soon as we can, you know, get some input from Rotimi Fakayejo, who is joining us from our Abuja studio. He's also a stockbroker, and of course, he would understand the system even better than us. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
All right, now, more and more companies, Nigerian companies, are delisting as opposed to the stock exchange by itself delisting these companies. Now, the cost, you know, in 1 year alone, some 24 billion naira. That's what it costs companies to actually delist from the stock exchange. Is it worth it at the end of the day for companies to actually delist since they're going into the stock market to, you know, widen the pool of profit anyhow?
Well, to me, naturally, it's a good thing to list. But it's when a company is listed and it seeks delisting, it's a disservice to the investors, at least the minority investors. So far, since 2008, we've had about 90 companies delisted from the exchange. Some by way of regulatory, some by way of merger, some by way of voluntary delisting. This has not really been in the interest of investors. A lot of people bought shares in those companies basically because they are going to be listed on the exchange. And for this happening right now, I believe though the market is a free entry and free exit market, but at the same time, there needs to be more measures that give encouragement for quoted companies to stay, and at the same time for investors to be able to have a good value for their money under the supervision of the NSC and the Securities and Exchange Commission.
But are there no policies in place at the market to protect minority shareholders, especially when companies delist, so that they do not lose out, as many of them have done in the past?
Well, the only way that a company, the minority shareholders are not shortchanged is only when the companies themselves seek delisting. And that way there will be a tender offer process with which a specific price will be given for investors to be able to at least give, credence to what is happening. An agreement to be reached at an extraordinary general meeting, and after such, the investors will be compensated. But when it is regulatory delisting, then it's a lose-lose approach for the investors. They don't have anything at all, and I don't think there's been anything in place to actually protect them, and more so for the fact that companies are being delisted because they are not ensuring and keeping to post-listing requirements. And as such, when that happens, it also implies that their performance has been very much substandard, or maybe they're not even making company, or they're no more operating. A case study is that of Leonard's Nigeria PLC. I've been to the premises, and what I find there is actually not encouraging at all. And so for that reason, as they sought delisting, the investors are, the minority shareholders are totally shortchanged, and there is nothing really anyone can do about that.
Let me still remain with you before we go back to Nnameka Obiareri. Nnameka talked about the lack of transparency and very weak regulatory framework on the part of the NSC. Do you see that as a major challenge with the Nigerian Stock Exchange that could lead to companies actually pulling out of the stock exchange?
Well, there's to some extent that the stock exchange, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, has some limitations in terms of enforcement. The only enforcement they can do is to delist, and I believe at this juncture there ought to be some adjustment in CAMA, Companies and Allied Matters Act, which will enable the NSC to upgrade their regulatory oversight over the market, and also for SEC to be able to do likewise. But as long as we have the CAMA remaining the way it is, the stock exchange is not lacking in its responsibilities, but the law in place is actually what is giving a handicap to the stock exchange from enforcing the way it should be, rather than just delisting and not be able to put to question the transparency and the uprightness of the directors of the management of that company.
All right, stay with us, Rotimi. Let me come to you now, Nnameka. Earlier, I asked you about the minimum quoted firms making sure they meet the minimum standards, post-listing minimum standards, and you were about to talk about it.
Okay, I was actually trying to discuss what this Nigerian Stock Exchange must do to ensure more transparency in the operations of those companies that are listed on the floor of the exchange. I insist that one of the ways that they must insist on putting a non-executive director on the board of those companies. The Nigerian Stock Exchange must independently appoint somebody on any board of any company that wants to list on the floor of the exchange to ensure transparency, to ensure independent observation of what happens in those companies. And they must also insist on the companies performing or living up to their obligations by way of ensure that they put in their quarterly report as and when due on the floor of the exchange as is required. They must also find ways of making sure that the majority shareholders do not take advantage of their control of the management of the company to rip off the minority shareholders. We have situations in this country where 40% shareholding by majority shareholders and 60% shareholding by minority shareholders who invested small, little amount of money. At the end of it, these majority shareholders will leverage on that their 40% to rip off and even strip the assets of the company to the detriment of the minority shareholders. Imagine how painful it is for somebody to invest 40 million naira in a company since 2009, no dividend, no report, and the value of that shareholders' investment has gone down to about 4 million. And the major promoters of the company are living like kings and royalties. Some of them are even contesting elections, squandering billions of naira practically every 4 years. And these are the kind of things that discourage people. There are no sanctions, there are no punishments. Let me tell you, the kind of impunity we have in Nigeria, both in the public and private sector, is alarming. The kind of things majority shareholders and promoters of listed companies get away with in Nigeria will land them to 50 years jail or more than that in the place like US and the UK, where the markets are properly regulated. Let me tell you.
And I wonder, Nnameka, whether there should be a regulator that actually regulates the regulator to ensure that they actually use the powers vested in them.
Now let's go back to our discussion on the voluntary delisting of quoted firms at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. We've been talking to Obiareri Nnameka, an investment banker, and of course Rotimi Fakaijo, a stockbroker who's in Abuja studio. Thank you, gentlemen, for holding on. Now, let me come to you, Rotimi. How do you think this trend now of voluntary delisting of quoted firms and, of course, a lack of stiff penalties and rules in place to whip quoted firms in line would encourage foreign companies operating in Nigeria to want to list at the market?
Well, I think, like I made mention earlier, is very difficult for that to be in place because there are rules governing the activities in the exchange and also which is subject to that of karma. The voluntary delisting is something that has been happening. One of the ones that has dealt a very major blow to the market is that of Nigerian Bottling Company, which happened a few years back. And with that, it's not really been an encouragement. We've seen one or two other major companies wanting to delist, but I think somehow it didn't happen. But giving that as a boost for companies to want to list, I think more measures have to be put in place, and the regulatory, the law governing that with respect to karma in terms of making some amendments has also to be done. But I don't think that will be a major deterrent for now, as both Securities and Exchange Commission and Nigerian Stock Exchange are making frantic efforts to ensure that we get more companies listed on the exchange. So I believe that that may not really imply much for now, but in going forward, a lot needs to be done in order for them to at least to be some sort of measure that will not allow maybe so much free exit from the market.
And speaking of which, back to Nnemeka Obiareri, Fakaye just talked about the pulling out of the Nigerian Bottling Company. Of course, that was rejected by some people, but I wonder how that really panned out. Of course, the Communication Minister, Shitu, has been calling on some telecom companies, big companies with huge portfolios, to actually list on the Nigeria Stock Exchange, and they have not really taken that up. What would it take to get, such huge, big companies to actually list on the Nigeria Stock Exchange?
An efficient capital market is attractive to both the investor and the companies seeking to list on the exchange. I give you a typical example. Just sit back and ask yourself this question. For a South African economy that's about $298 billion, to have a capital market with a depth of about $1 trillion, just sit down and think and imagine what the size of Nigeria Stock Exchange, Nigeria capital market can be if we do the right things and put the right things in place. Let me tell you, companies will be excited to be listed on the floor of the exchange if they realize that there will be large pool of investors that will want to buy their shares, that will want to invest in them. One of the things I recommend that the Nigeria Stock Exchange, that the government of Nigeria must do to inject transparency. We talked about the Whistleblowers Act in the public sector. We must also institute the Whistleblowers Act in the Nigeria Stock Exchange. What I think the SEC should do, the Security and Exchange Commission, or even the National Assembly committees on the capital market should do, is to establish a sub-agency, even if it's a desk, where stakeholders, both employees of these quoted companies, where these even minority shareholders, where even other stakeholders are encouraged to blow whistle, where they identify infractions and excesses on the part of the majority shareholders, on the part of the directors and the management of these companies, in such ways, if there are benefits, say for instance, for any infraction that you blow a whistle on, maybe diversion of fund, stripping of assets of the company, abuse of trust and accountability, there is a percentage on investment on it. Most people will be encouraged to blow the whistle. Let me tell you, one of the things that have stifled the growth of Nigerian economy is the absence of a thriving and efficient capital market like we have in other developed economies. Imagine the whole essence of the capital market is to pool long-term resources. Most foreign companies will want to be listed if these things are done. Imagine where we have over 70% of Nigerians putting their monies in the stock market. Companies will come in to list. Most private companies that are struggling to raise money from commercial banks can easily access money. We talk about building SMEs. We'll talk about developing the real sector of the economy. We'll talk about diversification. There can be no true diversification where there is no easy access to capital. Most deposit money banks in Nigeria do not have long-term capital to lend. And the only avenue and platform that can provide veritable growth companies in the real sector, especially in the agro and agro processing, to list or to come to the stock market is where there are assets and where there is investor confidence and interest in the market. So one, and again, the House Committee on the Capital Market must live up to their responsibilities. We've had instances where
all right. Yes, thank you very much. You couldn't have said it any better, really. For stakeholders to want to invest, they have to be assured of security. Thank you, Nnaemeka Obiareri, investment banker, for your analysis on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Now, Rotimi, it's quite interesting, really, because we understand that people can still trade on delisted companies, on OTC and Pink Sheets. Explain that to us.
Well, I think some years back, we've had some companies delisting from the Nigerian Stock Exchange and going to the NASD, Nigeria Association of Security Dealers, OTC market. And well, to me, if you are going from one regulatory if you are saying one regulatory oversight is too much and you are now finding solace in another, I think investors really need to be very cautious with respect to that. But be that as it may, the two markets are in existence and they are there. We have a situation whereby the parent company is listed on the OTC and the other company is listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. That is recent happening. But for me, I believe that that kind of thing ought not to be encouraged for somebody to get delisted from Nigerian Stock Exchange and go ahead and get listed on NASD OTC. Is definitely allowing people to be able to run their show the way they like without necessarily subjecting themselves to regulatory oversight. So I believe that the Security and Exchange Commission has the oversight function over all exchanges in Nigeria, both the Nigerian Stock Exchange and Nigerian Association of Security Dealers. So I expect that more and more measures and collaborations need to be put in place in order to give more encouragement. We are expecting that quality companies, not too many quality companies are listed on the exchange, and the encouragement is going on. But I think a lot also has to be looked at the listing requirements, which some people are actually not comfortable with, or in the process of having listed already, maybe complying with all of those things. So I believe there should be a JoJo approach among existing listed companies and the proposed list those companies that are being given some propositions to come and get listed. So I believe a lot can still be achieved with respect to this, and I hope that the Security and Exchange Commission will continue in their good work to actually encourage more people, more companies to get listed on the exchange.
Would you say then that the requirements for getting listed on the NSC are too stringent?
No, they are not too stringent. They are also in conformity with what is obtainable in other countries. So it's not our own in Nigeria are not extraordinary. They are what is supposed to be done. But there are other things that maybe we now need to come to terms, at least with respect to what is happening in our own country. And as such, I believe that we can achieve so much. The NSC is, as listening ears, they entertain people to come and suggest, give suggestions. And I think that has helped a lot in time past. So those who are still very much holding back in coming to list on the exchange, I believe they can make better approach to the stock exchange, and I believe a lot lot be achieved. So
would it help at all? Let me throw this in. Would it help at all? Because I actually asked Rotimi Fakaejo, I asked that question. If it would help, now that we've been told, and I underline that, we've been told that Nigeria is officially out of recession, would it be told, and I underline that, we've been told that Nigeria is officially out of recession. Would it be the kind of encouraging signal that some of these companies that have delisted would want to see? Would it give them enough confidence to go back?
That's for me. Okay.
Yes.
To me, I believe we are seeing a lot of good things happening in the market presently. With the Nigeria coming out of recession gradually, in about a year or two back, we've seen a situation whereby companies came to do right issue and they failed. But the recent ones we are having presently, there's a lot of encouragement, and we can be very sure that we can have about 80% of that about subscription.
All right,
thereafter, the market is coming back.
Yeah, because of time.
So now it may be just the right time for them to come and
okay, because of time, let me just quickly ask you, so just with that in, we understand that already quoted companies most usually get their shares undervalued. So why is that really? And do you think it's encouraging to those potential firms that would want to get listed?
Well, I think but one thing we need to look at again, are those companies overvalued as at the time of listing? We've had some companies come to list at 5 naira, and eventually the market find its level, find its level, and those companies rested at about 2 naira 50 kobo. So if they were overvalued at the onset, at the inception, then definitely they will need to find their value. But also we cannot put aside the issue of volatility in price in the market due to the way the economy is. So for that, we need a more vibrant economy in order for prices to be sustained.
But then, is there no process for price
to their shares without having to run out now and then?
But is there no process for price assessment before shares are valued at any price and then be listed at the market?
Well, in the past, that used to happen, but I think when a lot of issuers complained and all of that, so the process is left for the issuing house and also the company itself to determine so much with respect to different approaches to pricing of securities, and that now will come under the approval of the Securities and Exchange Commission and also Nigerian Stock Exchange. So that process is there, but at the same time, you cannot the extent to which some companies go cannot be overemphasized. So I believe that we are getting better by the day, and I think we will definitely get there someday. All
right, that's part of the regulatory guidelines that both gentlemen talked about earlier. Naimeka Obiari is a financial consultant and investment banker. Of course, joined us also via Skype. Rotimi Fakaejo is a stockbroker joining us from Abuja studio. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and your insights. It's time now.